I thought I was safe in my dorm, paying $1,200 rent, until my landlord sabotaged my health and lied to insurance. Diesel fumes, panic attacks, and whispers followed me everywhere. Then I discovered my spouse was secretly married to 3 others. This is the story of betrayal, manipulation, and survival, and how I finally fought back. It started with the smell of diesel and a lie that cost me everything. I was standing in the hallway of my dorm apartment, clutching a letter from my insurance company that said my claim was denied due to fraudulent statements made by the landlord. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I could still smell the faint fumes from John's truck downstairs, the sour, metallic reek of diesel that always meant he was near. And for months, near had started to feel like a threat. 2 weeks earlier, I'd collapsed on the dorm floor. My chest burned, my vision went white, and my 16-year-old brother George was the one who called the ambulance. I'd later find out the air system was contaminated, a maintenance failure John never reported. Instead, he filed a false report saying I had caused the damage myself for insurance money. That one lie destroyed my coverage, my credit, and my peace of mind. Back then, I trusted him. John wasn't just my landlord, he'd been almost a friend. When I moved into that converted college dorm at 2439 Lakeview Avenue in an old campus building turned into apartments, he'd offered me a discounted $1,200 rent if I handled minor repairs. I'd been working nights at the college as a custodian, saving money for George's tuition after our parents passed. It felt like a lifeline. Every Friday night, I'd pick up takeout pizza from the shop down the block with the greasy cardboard smell, the melted cheese sticking to the top of the box. George loved it. We'd sit cross-legged on the floor surrounded by his toy cars, pretending they were little delivery trucks, and talk about what college would be like for him someday. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. Until John started showing up unannounced. The first red flag came late one evening, around 11:47 p.m. I was grading papers for a professor who let me pick up extra work, and George was asleep. I heard footsteps outside, slow and heavy. Then the unmistakable jingle of John's keys. I opened the door before he could use them. "Just checking the smoke detectors," he said, smiling too wide. "At midnight?" I asked. "Yeah, system issue. Gotta keep up with inspections, right?" His tone was casual, but his eyes lingered scanning the room, the pizza box, the bills stacked on the counter. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The following week, strange things started happening. The heater stopped working. The water pressure cut out at random. My mail disappeared. When I asked John about it, he'd shrug and joke, maybe the place is haunted. But then one night, George found a hidden camera behind the air vent, tiny, blinking red. That was the night I realized this wasn't about rent or repairs. It was about control. I tried to report it. I called the local precinct on November 4th, 2022, at exactly 9:32 p.m., hands trembling as I gave the officer the camera. But when they arrived, John was already there, calm and smiling. "Misunderstanding," he told them. "I gave permission for a maintenance check. Gregory must have found the wrong unit." The officer nodded, almost apologetically. I didn't know it then, but that officer was John's cousin. My report never even made it into the system. After that, everything spiraled. I got sick headaches, nausea, constant coughing. The campus clinic said it might be carbon monoxide exposure. But when they checked my file, the records had been lost. John later admitted the heating system hadn't been serviced in years. George begged me to move out, but we couldn't. The insurance denial meant I couldn't afford a new place, and John had locked us into a lease with a penalty clause that would ruin my credit if I broke it. I remember one night, sitting on the floor with George's toy car scattered around me, eating cold pizza straight from the box. The diesel fumes from John's truck drifted in through the cracked window, and I swear I could taste them. My chest felt tight, not just from the air, but from fear. That was when I realized something darker was happening. Failures, the sickness, the denials, they weren't coincidences. They were connected. Someone was sabotaging us. And the first name on every piece of paperwork, every inspection form, every false claim was John's. But I still had no idea how far the rot went or how many people were helping him hide it. After that first night with the camera, I started noticing patterns that didn't make sense. Little things that I had brushed off before suddenly became terrifyingly clear. John wasn't just careless, he was deliberate. Every late evening, I'd smell that diesel, like a warning that he was nearby, watching, controlling. One Tuesday, December 7th, 2022, I came back from my night shift at 11:15 p.m. George was asleep in the corner, surrounded by his toy cars lined up like tiny soldiers. I had a leftover slice of pizza in my hand, the cheese hardened from sitting under the lamp. That's when I saw the water in the bathroom sink bubbling oddly. At first, I thought it was pressure, but then I noticed the faint metallic smell. Diesel. Somehow, the water had been contaminated. My stomach dropped. I felt the tight, icy grip of panic, my pulse spiking, my hands shaking as I gagged on the smell. After I got promoted to lead custodian in January 2023, I thought things might stabilize. More income meant maybe we could finally move. But the promotion just made me a target. John started inspecting more often, claiming code violations and telling me he was protecting the property. I started having nightmares, vivid ones where George and I were trapped in the dorm, surrounded by diesel smoke, unable to breathe, and no one would help us. Waking up in a sweat at 3:14 a.m. became routine. I had trouble trusting anyone, even neighbours who offered vague, sympathetic smiles. That's when Mrs. Albright, the neighbour from 2437 Lakeview, slipped me a folded piece of paper. "I've been recording things," she whispered. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender and burnt coffee, a strange comfort compared to the dome. "Don't let him know. You will need proof if things go south." She handed me a USB with video footage. John entering apartments late at night, fiddling with thermostats and ventilation systems, even tampering with someone else's smoke detectors. Watching it, I felt a mix of relief and horror. Finally proof. But also fear. How many others had he hurt? Then came the small betrayals that cut deep. My best friend from college, Mark, had helped me pack once. Later, I found out he had texted John about my financial situation, including the $1,200 rent I paid, claiming I was irresponsible with money. Every betrayal was like a weight pressing down on my chest. I couldn't trust anyone. Every conversation felt like a potential trap. One night, after another confrontation with John at 10:57 p.m, I was pacing the hallway, trying to calm myself. George watched silently from the couch, his tiny fingers gripping the wheels of a toy car. "Greg, you okay?" he asked, eyes wide. I wanted to tell him the truth that our home had been weaponized against us, but I couldn't. Not yet. "Yeah, just tired," I muttered, forcing a smile. But inside, the panic was rising again, a storm in my chest that wouldn't stop. Therapy sessions were already in the works. The campus psychologist, Dr. Reynolds, agreed to see me twice a week. "You're showing classic signs of hypervigilance," she said after our first session. "Your nervous system is stuck in survival mode. That's normal given what you're experiencing." Even with therapy, trust issues were eating at me. I couldn't accept that anyone might have ulterior motives, not friends, not neighbours, not even George at times when I felt too fragile to cope. And whispers from the other residents didn't help. They passed me in the halls, eyes flicking away, voices hushed. "Did you hear what happened to Gregory?" They'd murmur. My reputation, painstakingly built over years of hard work, felt like it was dissolving overnight. I started keeping a journal. Every late night diesel smell, every suspicious knock, every small sabotage. On January 19th, 2023, I wrote, "I can't trust John. I can't trust anyone. I can't even trust my own senses anymore." That line nearly made me break down on the spot. George noticed my spiraling panic. One night, he sat beside me on the floor, lining up his toy cars, and said quietly, "We'll get out of this, Greg. I know we will." I nodded, grateful, but inside I felt paralyzed. The dread was constant, like a shadow over every meal, every word, every interaction. It was clear, John's sabotage was escalating. The contamination of the water, the tampering with heat, the lies to insurance, it wasn't random. He was setting us up, isolating us, controlling every part of our lives. And everyone in the world seemed either unaware, complicit, or unwilling to help. By late February 2023, I realized that uncovering John's actions wasn't enough. I needed proof that could survive scrutiny and a plan to reveal it without losing what little stability I had left. I didn't yet know that the betrayals went deeper than I could imagine, involving the police, friends, and even my spouse. But the tension was building, coiling tighter with every diesel-scented breath I took in that dome. And that's when I started seeing the real shape of the storm coming for me. It hit me on March 12, 2023, around 2:03 a.m, when I couldn't sleep again. George was snoring softly, toy cars scattered like tiny witnesses to our sleepless nights. I went back to the USB Mrs. Albright had given me, hoping to find a pattern I had missed. That's when I saw it. John hadn't just been sabotaging me, he'd been orchestrating a full-scale cover-up involving the campus insurance office, maintenance staff, and even my closest friends. One clip made my stomach drop. John was on the phone, whispering, "Yes, make sure Gregory's claims are denied, and the officer, he's a cousin. Don't let him see any files." I froze. The very same officer who had investigated my hidden camera report. Family. My complaint never officially existed. Every late-night panic attack, every hospital visit, every sleepless night, deliberately orchestrated. Then came the shocker I never expected, my spouse. I was scrolling through old emails, hoping to distract myself from the panic in my chest, when I found marriage certificates, 3 of them. She was married to 3 other people simultaneously. I read each one in disbelief, my hands trembling, cold sweat soaking the back of my shirt. Our marriage, the life I thought I had built till I laid on top of a lie. The betrayal wasn't just about John or the doll. It was everywhere I looked. George came in when he heard me gasp. "Greg?" His small voice was cautious, protective. I shook my head. "It's everything," I muttered. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by invisible hands, each breath a struggle. That night, I had nightmares worse than ever, doors slamming, diesel smoke choking us, sirens blaring, people whispering, pointing. I woke up screaming, covered in sweat, the toy cars overturned around me. I decided to confront John, but the deeper I dug, the more betrayals I uncovered. Mark, my friend, had shared financial details. Campus maintenance staff had silently complied with John's sabotage. Even some neighbours, fearing retaliation, stayed silent. Mrs. Albright had been the only ally, recording evidence in secret. Her courage was a rare lifeline amid a sea of deceit. The psychological impact was crushing. I developed panic attacks at random times, walking past the laundry room, smelling diesel, even hearing footsteps at 7 p.m. My trust issues worsened. Therapy sessions with Dr. Reynolds became lifelines, but even she warned me, Gregory, the way your nervous system is reacting is normal for prolonged trauma, but it requires thinking. You'll question motives constantly, even when people are genuine. She was right. I became hyper-aware, analysing every glance, every whisper. The community's reaction cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Neighbours whispered whenever I walked by. Did you hear what happened with Gregory? Voices hissed behind closed doors. Even casual acquaintances at work started avoiding me. My reputation was shredded. People assumed I was unstable, maybe exaggerating. Alone in my apartment, I could hear the diesel hum of John's truck in the distance and felt utterly exposed. By late March, I uncovered yet another betrayal. The police officer's inaction wasn't just nepotism. He had deliberately buried my reports, falsifying logs and telling colleagues I had mental health issues that impaired judgment. I was being gaslit on a systemic level. Every attempt to reclaim my life felt like running through quicksand. I remember sitting on the floor one night, surrounded by the chaos of George's toy cars and empty pizza boxes, thinking, this isn't just harassment. It's war. I felt isolated, paranoid, and utterly broken. My nightmares intensified. I'd wake in cold sweats at 3:45 a.m., imagining the diesel fumes filling the dorm, imagining the whispers growing louder, the world collapsing in on me. The final discovery came unexpectedly. Reviewing old recordings, I realized the sabotage extended beyond the dome. John had a network of friends and associates ready to discredit anyone who tried to expose him. Even my closest friends were complicit, feeding him information about me. The extent of betrayal was staggering. I felt the world crumbling beneath me. And yet, amid all this despair, a strange clarity emerged. I understood the full scale of the corruption. I understood who my allies truly were: Mrs. Albright and, reluctantly, George. For the first time, I realized that to survive, I had to confront the web of lies. The psychological trauma, the panic attacks, the isolation, these were not just symptoms of my suffering. They were signals, showing me the boundaries of the battlefield I needed to navigate. By the end of March, I had collected the evidence I needed. The betrayal wasn't just financial, or even emotional. It was systemic. John, my spouse, the police, my friends, they had all conspired to strip me of my home, my health, my reputation. But knowing the truth was both terrifying and empowering. I had to act, but I had to be careful. That night, as I watched George arrange his cars in neat rows on the carpet, I felt a strange sense of determination. We are not done yet. They may have taken our peace, but they haven't broken us completely. Graduation Day, May 18th, 2023, was supposed to be a celebration. The campus was alive with laughter, cups flipping in the air, and families crowded in folding chairs. I felt none of it. My hands trembled as I clutched the stack of printed evidence, emails, photos, videos, all the proof of John's sabotage, my spouse's multiple marriages, and the collusion that had destroyed my life. George leaned over, whispering, Greg, you sure you want to do this here? His voice was small but steady, like the grounding I had so desperately needed. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Every neighbour, every student, every parent, they'd all seen me walk past, whispering, assuming I was the problem. Now it was time to turn the tables. As the dean called names, I waited my turn. My palms were slick and my heart raced, the panic I had lived with for months crawling like a snake in my chest. Finally, my name was called. Gregory Hayes, summa cum laude. I walked up, the diesel smell faint in the distance. I still noticed it everywhere. And then, just as I reached the podium, I stopped. I held up the USB. Before I accept this degree, I said, voice shaking but growing stronger, I need to reveal the truth about what's been happening to me and how those I trusted conspired to destroy my life. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Parents murmured. Students froze mid-clap. I projected the first video onto the large screen behind the stage. John's face filled the auditorium, caught entering apartments in the dead of night, tampering with ventilation and water systems. This is John, I said. My landlord, the man responsible for making my dorm a hazard and for lying to insurance to deny my claims. The murmurs grew louder. I clicked through emails, showing messages from my spouse's multiple marriages. The audience audibly gasped. Some parents began whispering frantically to one another. My own mother-in-law, who had flown in believing she was attending a normal graduation, looked like she might faint. I also want to show that my reports to the police were buried by a cousin of John's, I continued, my voice steadier now, and that even friends I trusted, like Mark, fed information to him to sabotage me further. This was not just harassment, it was a conspiracy. A few students began clapping nervously. Others sat frozen, some parents left in disbelief. The dean's face turned red as he whispered to an assistant. But I didn't stop. I have proof of everything, and while it's terrifying, I refuse to let their lies define me. I refuse to let them win. At that moment, someone shouted from the back, "You're lying." I didn't flinch. A few people stood pointing fingers. But Mrs. Albright, sitting quietly near the front, raised her hand and nodded. Her recordings had corroborated every claim. She had been the silent witness all along. John, sitting in the audience, pale and stiff, finally stood. "This is slander," he yelled. But no one moved to defend him. The weight of months of whispers, secrets, and betrayals had finally cracked his armour. My spouse stormed out, leaving a trail of stunned family members behind, while Mark tried to sneak away unnoticed. The auditorium was thick with tension, disbelief, and shock. For the first time in months, I felt my chest loosen. Panic was still there, a low hum, but it was manageable. I had taken control, even if just for a moment. I turned the narrative back on those who had tried to strip me of everything. Afterward, campus security escorted John and the implicated police officer out. Students surrounded me, some offering hugs, others whispering apologies for their silence. George leaned into me, eyes bright proud. "We did it, Greg," he said quietly. "We really did it." I realized then that my strength wasn't just in exposing the truth. It was in surviving long enough to fight back. The months of therapy, the panic attacks, the isolation, and all of it had built me into someone who could endure the unthinkable and still stand. That day, I didn't just graduate academically. I graduated from fear, from manipulation, from a life dictated by others' lies. And though the road ahead was uncertain, legal battles with John, restoring my reputation, repairing fractured friendships, I finally had the clarity and courage to face it. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The days after graduation were a blur. I thought exposing John and my spouse would bring relief, but instead, the aftermath crushed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every time I stepped outside my apartment, neighbours stared. Some whispered, others avoided eye contact, and a few outright gossiped in front of me. The social isolation I had feared now felt complete. I wasn't just traumatized, I was publicly shamed. I spent May 20th, 2023, walking past the hallways of my dorm, watching the familiar diesel smell drifting from John's abandoned truck. It was a scent that once meant danger, but now it carried an almost bitter memory of every panic attack, every sleepless night, every time I had felt powerless. My chest ached as I thought about George, who tried to smile through his own fear, lining up his toy cars on the cold tile floor while I paced like a caged animal. Even with Mrs. Albright's support, the legal battles loomed like dark clouds. John had already filed counterclaims claiming defamation. My spouse had disappeared, leaving me to deal with tangled legal paperwork regarding multiple marriages. I felt cornered, financially drained, and emotionally exhausted. Every bill, every overdue notice reminded me of the $1,200 rent I had paid faithfully while my life was being dismantled. The psychological toll became unrelenting. Nightmares dominated my sleep. On May 25th, I woke screaming at 3:17 a.m., visions of diesel smoke filling the dorm, fire alarms blaring, people pointing, and George trapped on the floor among his toy cars. My body shook uncontrollably. Panic attacks came at random moments, walking down the hallway, opening emails, even laughing at dinner with a friend. My therapist, Dr. Reynolds, described it as classic post-traumatic stress compounded by betrayal trauma. Your nervous system is trying to protect you, Gregory, but it's overcompensating, she explained. Trust, once a simple part of life, became a labyrinth I couldn't navigate. Calls from friends went unanswered. Even casual colleagues seemed hesitant, unsure if the Gregory Hayes incident was real or imagined. I would rehearse conversations in my head for hours, analysing tone and word choice. Every interaction felt like potential sabotage. Medical treatment became routine. I saw a pulmonologist for the lingering respiratory issues from contaminated ventilation. I underwent regular blood tests and lung function exams, but the smell of diesel still triggered a wave of nausea and panic. Each hospital visit reminded me of the vulnerability I had endured while John's lies prevented coverage. Financial ruin followed quickly. My savings, already limited, were drained by emergency therapy sessions, legal fees, and medical bills. The $1,200 rent, once manageable, became a burden I could barely handle. I scoured assistance programs, but the stigma of public exposure made every application a humiliating process. Even George felt the weight. He was only 16, but the whispered judgments from neighbours, the sudden absence of friends, and the pervasive tension in the dorm had forced him to grow up overnight. I felt helpless watching him try to navigate the social fallout I had endured. Some nights, he would place his toy cars in neat rows on the floor and ask, "Greg, will this ever end?" And I would have no answer but a shaky nod. By June, I was barely functioning. Daily life, eating, sleeping, showering became monumental tasks. My apartment, once a sanctuary with the faint smell of pizza and the warmth of shared evenings, felt like a tomb of betrayal and fear. I was convinced that everyone, even people I loved, had a hidden agenda. Then came the final blow. John's network tried to intimidate Mrs. Albright, making her fear for her own safety. The realization that our only ally could be silenced, that the abuse extended further than I imagined, nearly broke me completely. That night, sitting in the dark with George asleep nearby, I clutched his toy cars and cried, feeling utterly powerless. I wrote in my journal, trembling, "I am alone, I am broken, I trusted, and they all betrayed me. I don't know how to fight anymore." For the first time, I considered giving up, abandoning the fight, leaving George and myself to sink under the weight of public shame, betrayal, and systemic sabotage. It was rock bottom. I was physically exhausted, psychologically shattered, financially crippled, and socially isolated. Every step forward seemed impossible. My nightmares were no longer dreams, they had become a permanent part of my waking life. The panic, the trust issues, the humiliation, I had become a shell of the person who had once navigated life with hope and humour. And yet, buried beneath that despair was a faint, stubborn ember, the knowledge that survival was the first step. It was a whisper, almost imperceptible, but it told me I could rebuild. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to for George, for myself, for the life I had been denied. Recovery didn't come overnight. In fact, the first months felt like wading through thick fog, each step heavier than the last. But I started small. July 3rd, 2023, I walked into a local support group for trauma survivors. The room smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, a stark contrast to the diesel I had associated with fear. Sitting among people who had faced their own betrayals, I realized I wasn't truly alone. Therapy with Dr. Reynolds became my lifeline. Twice a week, I unpacked months of trauma, the panic attacks, the nightmares, the whispered judgments from neighbours, the suffocating sense of betrayal from John, my spouse, and friends. Your nervous system has been rewired by trauma, she reminded me, but rewiring it again toward safety and trust is possible. We worked on grounding exercises, breathing techniques, and slowly rebuilding my sense of reality. Every panic attack became a lesson in resilience. I began documenting everything meticulously. Legal filings, receipts, medical records, videos from Assess Albright, each piece a building block to reclaim control. By late August, we had enough evidence to take John to court. The hearings were grueling. He tried to gaslight me again, insisting the contamination and sabotage were misunderstandings. But this time I was prepared. Mrs. Albright testified, and the evidence was undeniable. I felt a strange, cathartic satisfaction as the judge finally ruled in my favour, a small victory after months of systemic betrayal. Financially, I started rebuilding too. I found part-time work at a non-profit, teaching life skills to at-risk youth. The pay was modest, but it allowed me to slowly repay debts, including the $1,200 rent I had owed while fighting for coverage. George even got a scholarship for school, and watching him flourish reminded me that our lives weren't defined by the betrayals we endured, they were defined by how we responded. I also made a conscious effort to reclaim social trust. It wasn't easy. Every new friendship was filtered through months of trauma and suspicion, but I leaned on people who had proven themselves, Mrs. Albright, a few steadfast co-workers, and eventually George himself, who showed me that trust could be rebuilt incrementally. Slowly, I allowed laughter back into our home. Takeout pizza nights returned, and George's toy cars again littered the floor, symbols of a normalcy I had feared lost forever. By October 2023, I realized I needed a bigger change. The dorm and the city were heavy with memories of betrayal. I sold the apartment and used the funds to travel. The first stop was Lisbon, Portugal, where the salty Atlantic air cleared my lungs and my mind. I hiked coastal trails, journaled in cafes, and forced myself to experience trust in small doses of letting strangers guide me, trusting directions, tasting local dishes without overanalyzing every ingredient. Each city I visited in Barcelona, Tokyo, Cape Town became a therapy session. I fished for directly, crowded trains, unfamiliar streets, late-night taxis. I learned to breathe through panic, to let moments exist without anticipating sabotage, and to rebuild my nervous system around wonder instead of fear. Slowly, the nightmares faded, the panic attacks became rare, and the trust issues softened. I also gave back. I started volunteering with survivors of domestic harassment, sharing my story to help them navigate legal, emotional, and social battles. Teaching others gave my trauma purpose. Every whisper of disbelief, every avoided glance from strangers was replaced by gratitude and solidarity. Today, October 2025, I live in a small coastal town, financially stable, emotionally stronger, and connected to a community that values honesty and support. George is thriving, now 18, planning for college with dreams I thought we'd lost forever. I still carry memories of diesel fumes, of whispered betrayals, and of panic attacks, but they no longer control me. They remind me of the resilience I discovered in the darkest months of my life. I learned that personal growth doesn't erase trauma. It transforms it. The months of fear, betrayal, and isolation rewired me, yes, but not into weakness. They rewired me into someone capable of survival, empathy, and strength I never knew existed. I am no longer defined by what John, my spouse, or anyone else did to me. I am defined by how I reclaimed my life, rebuilt trust, and discovered that even after devastation, joy, courage, and freedom are possible. And as I sit on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, with the breeze carrying the salty tang and distant city lights flickering like stars, I finally understand. I survived. I thrived. I am free.